She was the forgotten piece of the puzzle, the silent victim in a story that has captivated millions. We saw her family, we heard their rage, but she herself remained a ghost, a name attached to a scandal. Sumit Singh's first wife. Her role in the 90-Day Fiancé saga was supposed to be over, a closed chapter settled with a quiet divorce and a significant financial payout. For years, that's all we knew. End of story, right? Wrong. The silence has been broken. The woman who was pushed into the shadows is allegedly stepping into the light, and her story, her truth, could be the one thing that finally dismantles the entire fragile reality Jenny Slatten has built with Sumit. According to reports surfacing from online bloggers and insider communities, Sumit's ex-wife has started talking, and the secrets she's revealing paint a picture so dark, so calculating, that the original Michael Jones catfish seems like a child's prank in comparison. She wants justice, and her truth could finally be the thing that makes Jenny walk away for good. Before we pull back the curtain on the lifetime of lies that Jenny allegedly doesn't know, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We dig deep into these stories, and you will not want to miss the updates that are bound to follow this explosive revelation. Click the notification bell, because the story of Sumit and Jenny is far from over, and what comes next could change everything. Now, let's take a quick step back. For anyone who might be new to this twisted tale, or for those who need a refresher on just how seismic the initial deception was, let's revisit the moment the first bomb dropped. We all remember Jenny Slatten, a hopeful romantic from Palm Springs, who had fallen head over heels for a man she knew as Michael Jones, a handsome English model. Their love was pure, their connection was real, but it was all conducted through a screen. The first red flag, of course, was that Sumit refused to video chat. He had excuses, always plausible, always just enough to keep Jenny hooked. But the truth was far more shocking. When Jenny finally packed her life into a few suitcases and flew to India, she wasn't met by Michael Jones. She was met by Sumit Singh, a call center employee living with his parents. The catfishing was exposed, but that, we were led to believe, was a big lie. The one great deception he had to commit to be with the woman he truly loved. He claimed he was scared, that he didn't think a woman like Jenny would fall for a man like him. It was framed as an act of insecurity, a desperate measure born from love. And Jenny, against all odds, forgave him. She chose to believe in the man, not the profile. But the lies were just getting started. The true earthquake came later, a moment of reality television so raw and so shocking it has become legendary. Jenny is living with Sumit in their apartment in India, trying to navigate the immense pressure from his traditional parents, Anil and Sahna, who vehemently disapprove of the relationship due to the 30-year age gap. Then one day, there's a knock at the door. It's not just Sumit's parents, it's a crowd. His father-in-law, his mother-in-law, his brother-in-law, his sister, his cousins. A wall of furious faces, and they deliver the news that shatters Jenny's world. Sumit is not just a single man who lied about his name. Sumit is a married man. He has been in an arranged marriage for years. The confrontation is gut-wrenching. Jenny is screaming, crying, utterly broken. Sumit is cornered, a panicked animal trapped by his own colossal web of deceit. His wife's family is threatening to press charges, to have him thrown in jail. In that moment, we see Sumit's father, Anil, make a promise. They will get him divorced. It's a chaotic, painful, and deeply humiliating public spectacle. This is the foundation upon which Jenny and Sumit's relationship is built. It's a foundation of lies, betrayal, and deep-seated family trauma. And through it all, the central figure of the first marriage, the wife herself, remained a complete unknown. We were told she was a victim, forced into a loveless arranged marriage, and that the divorce was the best thing for her too. Sumit paid a hefty sum, reportedly around $20,000 to secure his freedom. And that was that. His ex-wife faded into obscurity, and we were left with the narrative that Sumit, having made one monumental, life-destroying mistake, was now free to be with his one true love, Jenny. He was the good guy who had done a very bad thing, but his intentions at their core were supposedly pure. He loved Jenny. That was the one truth he held on to. But what if that too was a lie? What if the secret marriage wasn't a single isolated mistake? What if it was just one part of a much larger, much more disturbing pattern of behavior? This is where the new bombshell allegations come in, information that is now bubbling to the surface, from the very person who would know Sumit's secrets better than anyone. According to multiple 90-day bloggers who claim to have established contact with sources extremely close to the ex-wife, and in some cases, have seen messages allegedly from the ex-wife herself. The story we were sold is a complete fabrication. She has allegedly decided that she can no longer stay silent while Sumit and Jenny play out their love story on international television. A love story she claims is built on a foundation far more rotten than any of us could have imagined. Let's break down these explosive claims, one by one. The first allegation completely shatters the idea that Jenny was Sumit's one and only online love, the sole object of his affection who drove him to create a fake persona. According to these insider reports, the ex-wife claims that Sumit was a prolific online operator. The Michael Jones profile was not a one-off creation for Jenny, it was just his most successful one. She alleges that Sumit maintained multiple online profiles across various social media platforms and dating sites, each with a different name, a different backstory, and a different target demographic. He was allegedly in communication with several foreign women simultaneously, not just Jenny. There was reportedly a woman in Canada, another in Australia, and even one in Germany. He was casting a wide net, looking for a particular type of woman, older, often divorced or widowed, financially stable, and emotionally vulnerable. Jenny wasn't special because she was his one true love. According to this version of events, Jenny was special because she was the one who fell for it the hardest. She was the one who was willing to uproot her entire life, to spend her savings, to fly across the world for him. She wasn't the exception. She was the most promising prospect in a portfolio of potential cons. This allegation reframes Sumit's actions from a crime of passion to a calculated, systematic hunt. It suggests that his love for Jenny was less about a soulmate connection and more about her being the first one to take the bait in a significant way. He wasn't a man torn between two worlds. He was a man playing multiple games at once, and Jenny's game just happened to reach the final level. Imagine the chilling implication for Jenny. Every sweet nothing he whispered, every declaration of undying love, could have been a line he was beta testing on 3 other women in 3 different time zones. The second bombshell allegation delves into the financial aspect of the story, painting a picture not of a son struggling against his parents' wishes, but of a seasoned financial manipulator. We all know about the $20,000 Sumit's parents had to pay for his divorce. It was presented as a massive one-time sacrifice to clean up their son's catastrophic mess. However, his ex-wife allegedly claims this was anything but a one-time event. She asserts that Sumit had a long and established history of financially draining his own family. It was, she says, a pattern of behavior that began long before Jenny was ever in the picture. He would reportedly come to his parents with an endless stream of business ideas and investment opportunities that required significant capital but never, ever materialized. The sources detail a list of failed ventures. There was the plan to start a high-end tour guide service for wealthy Western tourists, for which he needed money for licensing and marketing. The money was given, and the business never appeared. There was the proposal for an import-export business dealing in American-made goods, requiring a hefty sum to establish supplier relationships. The money vanished, and not a single product was ever imported. Another time, it was an online tech support company he wanted to launch, needing funds for equipment and servers. Again, the money was provided, and the company remained a phantom. His ex-wife claims that his family, particularly his mother Sana, was growing increasingly weary of this cycle. They loved their son, but they were being bled dry by his constant, fruitless schemes. In this context, the $20,000 divorce settlement wasn't just about the shame of the failed marriage. It was the final, most expensive invoice in a long line of financial deceptions. It was the culmination of a pattern. This allegation suggests that Sumit has always viewed relationships, including those with his own family, through a transactional lens. The question it forces us to ask is a terrifying one. If he was willing to financially manipulate his own parents for years, why would Jenny be any different? Was she ever just his lover, or was she also, in his mind, his next and greatest business idea? It recasts every moment Jenny spent her savings, every dollar she used to set up their life in India, in a sinister new light. She wasn't just investing in a relationship. She may have been unwittingly funding the lifestyle of a man who had perfected the art of convincing people to give him money for nothing. But it's the third allegation that is, without a doubt, the most devastating. It's a claim so cruel, so deeply manipulative, that it has the power to poison every single memory Jenny has with Sumit. It recontextualizes not just his lies to Jenny, but the very nature of his relationship with his own wife during the time he was courting Jenny online. The ex-wife alleges that Sumit didn't just hide his online affair with Jenny from her, he allegedly incorporated it into their life together, but with a monstrous twist. She claims Sumit told her about Jenny, but he didn't tell her the truth. He allegedly told his wife that Jenny was a rich, lonely American widow. He claimed that he felt sorry for her and was helping her, acting as a friend and a confidant. But the most insidious part of the lie was the motive he supposedly gave his wife. He allegedly told her that he was going to get money from this lonely American woman, and that this money would be for them, for Sumit and his wife. He allegedly promised his wife that the funds from Jenny would help them buy a better apartment, start a real business, and build a more prosperous life together in India. According to this horrifying testimony, he wasn't just lying to Jenny about being single. He was lying to his own wife about Jenny, painting Jenny as a mark, a wealthy target from whom he could extract funds for their benefit. Let that sink in for a moment. If this is true, it means that while Sumit was whispering promises of love and a future to Jenny, he was sitting next to his wife, possibly in their shared bed, spinning a tale of financial conquest. Jenny wasn't his secret love. She was his secret project. Every "I love you" sent to Jenny in a text message could have been followed by a knowing glance to his wife, a silent communication that their plan was working. This allegation transforms Sumit from a man caught between two women into a predator who was actively using one woman to deceive the other, making his own wife a passive, unwitting accomplice in his scheme. It is a level of psychological cruelty that is almost unfathomable. It means that in Sumit's mind, Jenny was never the end goal. She was the means to an end. The love story he sold her was allegedly just the cover story for a financial scam he was running with his wife as the supposed beneficiary. This is the cruelest lie of all because it retroactively destroys the very premise of their entire relationship. Jenny has always held on to the belief that despite all the lies, Sumit's love for her was the one unshakable truth. This allegation argues that his love was the biggest lie of them all. When you put these three allegations together, the narrative we've been fed for years completely unravels. The image of Sumit as the good guy who made one mistake is obliterated. It's not a story of one mistake. It's the story of a lifetime of them. This testimony, if true, paints a picture of a calculating, habitual liar. A man for whom deception is not a last resort, but a first instinct. It's not a flaw in his character. It is his core character. The Michael Jones persona wasn't an anomaly. The hidden marriage wasn't an isolated incident. The financial requests from his parents weren't youthful indiscretions. According to these reports from his ex-wife, they are all data points that create a terrifyingly consistent graph. And the line on that graph is a man who uses and manipulates everyone around him for his own gain. His parents, his wife, and, most successfully, Jenny. Think about the psychological profile that emerges from these claims. A man who allegedly creates multiple fake identities to prey on vulnerable women online is not just insecure, he's predatory. A man who repeatedly extracts money from his family for phantom businesses is not just a bad entrepreneur, he's a grifter. And a man who allegedly tells his wife he's conning a lonely foreign woman for their mutual benefit is not just an adulterer, he's a sociopath. This is the portrait of Sumit that his ex-wife's testimony supposedly paints. It reframes every single interaction we have ever seen on television. His tearful apologies to Jenny, they could be seen as the practiced manipulations of a man who knows exactly what to say to calm his mark. His dramatic standoffs with his parents, perhaps they were less about fighting for love and more about frustration that his family would no longer bankroll his schemes. His quiet, seemingly gentle demeanor, it could be the perfect camouflage for a deeply calculating mind. This brings us to the ultimate, chilling, unanswered question. It's a question for Jenny, and it's a question for every single viewer who has followed this journey. We've seen Jenny forgive Sumit for one enormous, world-breaking lie. She found it in her heart to look past the catfishing and the secret wife. She believed it was all a panicked, desperate attempt to hold on to a love he feared he would lose. She bought into the narrative that he was a victim of his circumstances, of family pressure, of a culture he felt trapped in. She forgave the act because she believed in the man's heart. But can she forgive a lifetime of lies? Can she stay with a man when presented with evidence that she wasn't his one true love, but just his most successful con? Can she look at the man she married, the man she shares a bed with every night, and not wonder if every moment of their life together has been a performance? Can she ever truly trust him again, knowing that the very foundation of their relationship might not have been a lie he told for her, but a lie he told about her to someone else? How does a person reconcile that? How does Jenny move forward if she learns that for years she was allegedly referred to in his other life as the rich, lonely widow? The words are like poison, tainting every memory, every shared laugh, every tender moment. The entire history of their relationship is called into question. Was his frustration with his parents' disapproval genuine, or was it an act to make Jenny feel like they were a team against the world, isolating her further and making her more dependent on him? Was the pressure he felt about the divorce real, or was it a tool to garner sympathy and financial support? These are the questions that must be racing through anyone's mind upon hearing these allegations. Jenny has sacrificed everything for this man. She left her country, her children, her grandchildren, her financial security. She has endured years of uncertainty, ostracism, and emotional turmoil, all based on the belief that Sumit's love for her was real and worth fighting for. But if these claims are true, she didn't sacrifice it all for love. She sacrificed it all for a lie. It's a truth so devastating it could break even the most resilient spirit. The myth of Sumit and Jenny has always been one of star-crossed lovers overcoming impossible odds. But this new information suggests it might be a much darker, more common story. The story of a clever con artist and his most devoted victim. Let's really dig into the psychology here, the anatomy of the alleged deception. If the ex-wife's claims hold any water, Sumit is a master of compartmentalization. He was able to live one life with his wife, under the roof of his parents, adhering to cultural expectations while simultaneously building an entirely separate fictional universe online. This requires an incredible amount of mental energy and a profound lack of conscience. To maintain the Michael Jones persona with Jenny, while also potentially juggling conversations with other women as Rajesh or Vikram, and then coming home to his wife and performing the role of a dutiful husband. That's not something an ordinary person does. It speaks to a personality that is deeply skilled in manipulation and mirroring. He likely became an expert at telling people exactly what they wanted to hear. To Jenny, a woman seeking romance and escape, he was the passionate, misunderstood soulmate. To his parents, he was the son trying to find his way, even if he was constantly failing. To his wife, he was the clever husband with a plan to secure their future. He was a chameleon, changing his colors to suit his audience, with his own self-interest as the only constant. And we, the audience, were his biggest audience of all. We watched him cry. We watched him struggle. We felt his supposed pain. If these allegations are true, we were all conned right alongside Jenny. We bought into the redemption arc. We wanted to believe that a love this unconventional could triumph. We were rooting for the underdog. But what if we weren't watching a love story? What if we were watching a masterclass in deception, broadcast to millions? Let's re-examine the timeline. He catfished Jenny for the better part of a year before she first came to India. During that time, he was married. He was living with his wife. Every day, he would wake up next to one woman and then go to work, log on, and profess his undying love to another. The sheer audacity is staggering. And according to the new claims, he wasn't just hiding it from his wife. He was allegedly briefing her on it, spinning it as a financial strategy. This suggests a level of cold, calculated planning that is truly chilling. It wasn't a desperate, spur-of-the-moment lie. It was a long-term, ongoing operation. Now consider the financial pattern. The ex-wife's claim that the divorce payout was just the latest in a series of financial requests completely changes our understanding of his parents' anger. We saw Sahna and Anil as traditional, overbearing parents who were obsessed with what people will say. Their objections seemed to be purely about culture, age, and reputation. But if their son had been financially draining them for years with one failed scheme after another, their rage takes on a whole new dimension. It wasn't just about the shame of a divorce or an inappropriate daughter-in-law. It was about being pushed to their absolute limit. They weren't just losing face. They were losing their hard-earned money to a son they couldn't control. The $20,000 wasn't just a divorce settlement. It was a ransom payment to get their son back from a mess of his own making, and perhaps to sever ties with the family he had wronged so they wouldn't face legal repercussions. Their opposition to Jenny might have been less about her age and more about the fact that she was the catalyst for their son's most expensive mistake to date. They may have seen her not as a person, but as the living embodiment of Sumit's irresponsibility and deception. They weren't just trying to save their family's honor, they were trying to stop the financial bleeding. This brings us to the most difficult part of the equation, Jenny's role in all of this. For years, viewers have been divided. Some see her as a hopelessly naive romantic, while others have criticized her for ignoring a field of red flags that was visible from space. The truth is, skilled manipulators don't target strong, cynical people. They target people with big hearts, people who are willing to believe the best in others, people who are perhaps a bit lonely and craving connection. Jenny fit the bill perfectly, but these new allegations force a reevaluation of her own choices. The initial catfishing was one thing. A lie about a name and a photo can, by a stretch of romantic logic, be forgiven. The secret marriage was another, far greater betrayal. But she forgave that too. She chose to believe his story that he was trapped and miserable. She accepted his narrative. But if this new information were to be presented to her, a detailed, corroborated account from the ex-wife herself, could she continue to believe? At what point does forgiveness become willful blindness? At what point does staying become an act of self-destruction? Imagine Jenny sitting in her home in India, scrolling through the internet and seeing these headlines. Sumit's ex-wife alleges he scammed multiple women. Insiders claim Sumit lied to his wife about conning Jenny for money. How would that feel? It would be like discovering that the ground beneath your feet, the very earth you've stood on for a decade, was never solid at all. It was a mirage. Every sacrifice she made would feel not just painful, but foolish. Every battle she fought with his family would seem like a tragic waste of energy. She wasn't fighting for her great love, she was fighting for her great deceiver. The emotional fallout would be catastrophic. It would force her to question not only Sumit, but her own judgment, her own intuition, her own sanity. She would have to look back at every single moment of their relationship and ask, was that real? When he cried, was he crying for them, or was he crying because he was caught? When he held her, was it out of love, or was it to keep his investment close? These are the kinds of questions that can drive a person mad. The story now becomes a high-stakes conspiracy thriller. We, the viewers, are the detectives, piecing together the clues. Let's look at Sumit's behavior on the show through this new lens. Notice how often he defers, how he avoids direct confrontation, how he often appears panicked and overwhelmed. We interpreted this as weakness, as him being a gentle soul crushed by pressure. But it could also be interpreted as the behavior of a liar who is constantly afraid of his web unraveling. His default mode is passive because being passive allows him to avoid giving direct answers. He lets others, his parents, Jenny, his friends, drive the emotional narrative while he plays the part of the man caught in the middle. It's a brilliant strategy for a manipulator because it always casts him as the victim of the circumstances he himself created. He is never the agent of chaos, only the one suffering from it. But if his ex-wife's claims are true, he is not the victim. He is an architect. He is the one who drew the blueprints for all of this pain, and he has expertly convinced everyone else to blame the building materials. The third allegation, the one where he allegedly told his wife he was conning Jenny, is the linchpin that holds this entire dark theory together. It is the Rosetta Stone for translating Sumit's behavior. Because if he was capable of that level of duplicity, of making his wife a partner in a crime she didn't even fully understand, then he is capable of anything. It shows a capacity for psychological manipulation that is truly rare. He managed to victimize two women simultaneously, using each one as a tool in the deception of the other. To Jenny, he used his unhappy arranged marriage as a sob story to elicit sympathy and keep her on the hook. To his wife, he allegedly used the lonely American woman as the promise of a better future. It's a breathtakingly cynical strategy. It's a human pyramid scheme where the person at the top gets all the benefits, and the people at the bottom are left with nothing when it all collapses. And right now, the entire structure is shaking. The woman from the bottom of the pyramid has decided to speak, and her words could bring the whole thing crashing down. So we are left at a crossroads. The official story of Sumit and Jenny, the one told on TLC, is a story of love against all odds. But this new underground narrative, this samizdat version of events passed through bloggers and anonymous sources, tells a story of a decade-long con reaching its final precarious stages. Which one is true? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle. But the severity of these allegations cannot be ignored. They fit the known facts of the case, the catfishing, the secret marriage, the financial disputes, all too perfectly. They don't contradict the story we know. They provide a dark, unifying theory that explains it all. They turn a messy, complicated love story into a simple, terrifying story of a predator and his prey. This is why the ex-wife's testimony is the one thing that could truly end it all. Jenny could withstand ageism. She could withstand the cultural differences. She could withstand the family opposition. She could even withstand the initial lies. But she may not be able to withstand the revelation that the love itself, the very thing that made all the other sacrifices worthwhile, was the most profound lie of them all. It is the one pillar that, if kicked out, would cause the entire temple of their relationship to crumble into dust, leaving her buried in the rubble. Let's dissect the cruelest lie one more time, because its implications are truly staggering. The allegation is that Sumit presented Jenny to his wife as a mark, a lonely rich widow. This wasn't just a lie to cover an affair. It was a lie that dehumanized Jenny. It reduced her from a person, a lover, a partner, into an object, a walking, talking ATM machine, an asset to be exploited. In this alleged narrative, Jenny's feelings, her hopes, her sacrifices were all irrelevant. They were simply the unfortunate but necessary cost of doing business. Sumit, in this version of events, was not a man with a divided heart. He was a man with a singular, selfish goal, and he was willing to emotionally devastate multiple people to achieve it. The psychological damage of such a revelation is almost impossible to overstate. It would mean that Jenny wasn't just lied to, she was used in the most intimate and violating way possible. Her love and affection were not just unrequited, they were weaponized against her. Every time she sent him money, or offered him emotional support, or defended him to her friends and family, she wasn't building a relationship. She was funding her own deception. She was handing ammunition to the man who had her in his sights. Now, consider the position of the ex-wife. For years, she has been a footnote in their story, the faceless obstacle that had to be overcome. She was paid off and expected to disappear forever. But imagine what it must have been like for her. She lived through this. She was the one at home while Sumit was building his fantasy world online. If her allegations are true, she was also being manipulated, fed a different set of lies. She was promised a better future, financed by a stranger's heartbreak. Then it all blows up. Her marriage ends in public humiliation. Her family is enraged. Her life is turned upside down. And then she has to watch the man who did this to her become a reality TV star, celebrated for his love story with the very woman he allegedly told her he was conning. The injustice would be galling. Her silence was bought, but perhaps the price was not high enough to erase the deep sense of betrayal. Her speaking out now, even through anonymous channels, can be seen as an act of reclamation. She is refusing to be the silent victim anymore. She is taking back her story and exposing the man who she claims ruined her life, not out of love for another woman, but out of pure, unadulterated selfishness. Her voice is the ghost at the feast, the one person who can attest to what Sumit is like when the cameras are off, and her testimony is the key that could unlock the entire truth. Let's re-examine Sumit's parents, Sana and Anil, in this light. Their seemingly irrational and stubborn refusal to accept Jenny has been a central theme of the show. We saw them go to incredible lengths, from emotional blackmail to consulting astrologers to try and break them up. While much of it was framed as cultural disapproval, perhaps it was something more. Perhaps they knew, better than anyone, what their son was capable of. Maybe they had seen this pattern of deception play out in smaller ways his entire life. Maybe they saw in Jenny's devotion the same starry-eyed belief they once had in his business ideas. Maybe their desperation to separate them wasn't just about protecting their family's reputation, but about protecting Jenny from their son. It's a radical thought, but consider it. What if Sana's tears and Anil's stern lectures were not the actions of villains trying to thwart true love, but the desperate, clumsy attempts of parents who know their son is a danger to others, and they were trying to prevent another catastrophe? They had already paid $20,000 to clean up his last mess. Maybe they feared that his relationship with Jenny, if allowed to continue, would lead to an even greater disaster, one they could not afford to fix. This reframes their entire role in the drama, turning them from antagonists into tragic figures, trapped by the love for a son they cannot trust. This brings us back to the central question, the one that hangs over this entire saga. Who is the real Sumit Singh? Is he the gentle, soft-spoken man we see on TV? A man so deeply in love that he was willing to defy his family and his culture to be with his soulmate? A man who made terrible mistakes but ultimately has a good heart? Or is that all a carefully constructed mask? Is the real Sumit the man described in these allegations? A cold, calculating manipulator who has spent his entire adult life perfecting the art of the con? A man who sees people not as human beings with hearts and souls, but as resources to be exploited for his own benefit? A man for whom love is not a feeling, but a tool? A script he has learned to recite with convincing emotion? The evidence presented by his ex-wife's camp points overwhelmingly toward the latter. It suggests that good guy Sumit is the greatest fictional character he has ever created, even more convincing than Michael Jones. And so we are left with this final chilling thought, a question directed squarely at Jenny. You have forgiven him for one big lie, the lie of his identity and his marital status. You rebuilt your world on the belief that everything since that confession has been true. But can you forgive him for a lifetime of them? Can you forgive a man whose entire personality might be a fabrication? Can you continue to love a man, knowing that you were allegedly never his one true love, but just his most successful project, his most profitable con? The fairy tale is over. The dark, twisted reality has been laid bare. The choice is no longer about love versus culture. It's about truth versus a lie. And Jenny has to decide if she is willing to spend the rest of her life with a man who may not be capable of telling the difference. What do you think? If you were Jenny and you heard these new devastating allegations, what would you do? Could you find a way to stay? Or would this be the final, unforgivable betrayal? This is a defining moment in the 90-day universe. Comment, stay, or leave below, and tell us why. The story is clearly still developing, and the fallout from these revelations could be immense. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, because we will be following every twist and turn, and you will not want to miss what happens next. The question of whether to stay or leave seems simple on the surface, a binary choice. But for someone in Jenny's position, it's a decision tangled in a decade of emotional investment, financial sacrifice, and a psychological phenomenon known as the sunk cost fallacy. This is the idea that we are reluctant to abandon a strategy or course of action because we have invested heavily in it, even when it's clear that abandonment would be more beneficial. Jenny hasn't just invested money, she's invested her entire identity for the past 10 years. To leave now would be to admit that her love story, the defining chapter of her later life, was a fraud. It would be to admit that her daughters were right. It would be to admit that the millions of viewers who questioned her judgment were right. And that is a devastating admission for anyone to make. It is in many ways easier to believe the lie, to find a way to discredit the new information, to cling to the narrative you have built, because the alternative is to face a truth so catastrophic it threatens to erase your past and poison your future. A skilled manipulator knows this. They don't just rely on their own lies, they rely on their victims' desperate need to believe them. Let's engage in a bit of psychological forensics. Let's go back and re-examine key moments from their journey on 90 Day Fiancé. But this time, let's watch them through the cynical lens provided by these new allegations. Let's assume, for the sake of this thought experiment, that the ex-wife's testimony is 100% true. How does that change what we saw? Remember the early days when Jenny was living in India for the first time and Sumit was still living with his parents, sneaking away to be with her? He took her to an apartment he was renting, a place he claimed was for them, for their future. At the time, it seemed like a grand romantic gesture. Here was a man trapped by his circumstances, still finding a way to build a nest for the woman he loved. But let's apply the new theory. If Sumit is a financial manipulator who sees Jenny as an investment, that apartment looks very different. It's no longer a love nest, it's a proof of concept. It's a tangible asset he can show her, a way to demonstrate that her financial support is yielding results. It's a stage set for a play, designed to keep the show's lead actress and primary investor happy. He wasn't just paying rent on an apartment, he was maintaining a prop to keep the con alive. Every rupee he spent on that place was an investment in securing a much larger long-term payout from Jenny. It was a business expense. Now let's fast forward to one of the most iconic and painful scenes, the confrontation where Jenny learns Sumit is married. We all remember her visceral, heart-wrenching reaction. But let's focus on Sumit. Watch him closely. He is cornered, panicked, and overwhelmed. We read his emotion as the terror of being caught in a lie and the pain of hurting the woman he loves. But what if it was something else? What if we were witnessing the panic of a con artist whose entire operation was just publicly exposed? His carefully constructed worlds had just collided in the most violent way possible. The family of his first Mark, his wife, whom he had allegedly pacified with promises of future wealth, had just discovered the existence of his second, more lucrative Mark, Jenny. His carefully managed deception was in flames, and his primary emotion wasn't heartbreak, it was raw, primal fear. Fear of jail, yes, but also fear that his entire financial and lifestyle scheme was about to evaporate. His tears were not for his lost love, they were for his lost enterprise. When his father steps in and promises a divorce, Sumit's relief is palpable. The crisis has been managed, the operation can be salvaged, the con can go on. And what about the endless saga of his parents' disapproval? We've spent seasons watching Sahna cry and Anil posture. We analyzed their every word through the lens of cultural tradition and the age gap. But what if we were missing the real subtext? What if the ex-wife's claims about Sumit's history of failed business ideas are true? Imagine you are Sana. Your son has been coming to you for years with get-rich-quick schemes, and you have funded them, only to see the money disappear. Now he brings home his latest and most elaborate scheme. A 60-year-old American woman who has left her life behind for him. You don't see a daughter-in-law. You see the culmination of your son's worst impulses. You see a woman who is enabling his fantasy life, who is willing to fund his unemployment. When Sahna screams, "What will people say?" Maybe she's not just talking about the age gap. Maybe she's screaming, "How do I explain to our community that my son has thrown his life away, drained our resources, and is now living off a foreign pensioner?" Her fight against Jenny might have been a desperate, last-ditch effort to shock her son back into reality, to sever his connection to what she perceived as his most dangerous and unsustainable fantasy yet. It wasn't a fight against Jenny the person, it was a fight against Jenny the symbol of Sumit's lifelong pattern of irresponsibility and deception. They weren't trying to break his heart, they were trying to break his grift. This reinterpretation even extends to the spiritual and bureaucratic hurdles they faced. Remember their visit to the astrologer's dire warnings, and the immense stress it caused? For the audience, this was a fascinating look into cultural beliefs and another obstacle for the star-crossed lovers to overcome. For a manipulator, however, an obstacle like this is a gift. It's a perfect external force to blame for any delays or problems. It adds a layer of cosmic drama to their struggle, which in turn makes Jenny feel that their love is so powerful it is being tested by the heavens themselves. It strengthens their bond, making them feel like it's us against the universe. Sumit's distress over the astrologer's predictions could have been a masterful performance, designed to pull Jenny in deeper, to make their eventual triumph feel even more profound. Every external obstacle, whether it was his parents, the government bureaucracy, or the stars themselves, was a tool that could be used to reinforce the narrative and strengthen his victim's loyalty. And let's not forget the most crucial collateral damage in this story: Jenny's daughters, Christina and Dominique. From the very beginning, they have been the voice of reason, the Greek chorus pointing out the absurdity and danger of the situation. Their skepticism has often been portrayed as a lack of faith in their mother's happiness. But with this new information, their actions look less like doubt and more like clear-eyed protection. They saw the red flags. They questioned the catfishing. They were horrified by the secret marriage. They were not trying to ruin their mother's relationship. They were trying to save her from a man they instinctively recognized as a predator. Imagine the pain and frustration of watching your own mother, a woman you love, walk willingly into a situation you are convinced is a trap. You warn her, you beg her, you present her with evidence, and she chooses to believe the man who has already lied to her in the most profound ways. Every time Jenny chose Sumit over her daughter's concerns, it was another victory for the manipulator. He had successfully isolated her from the one support system that could have given her the strength and clarity to leave. Her daughters weren't the antagonists in her love story. They were the heroes who were trying and failing to rescue her. This leads us to the manipulator's endgame. What does Sumit truly want? If it were just about love, they would have found a simpler path long ago. If it were about a green card, he would have pushed to move to the United States. But he has consistently insisted on staying in India, where Jenny's Social Security income makes them relatively comfortable, and where he remains in his familiar environment, free from the pressures of having to build a life in a new country. This suggests the endgame is not about location, but about lifestyle. A lifestyle of comfort without responsibility. Jenny's love, and more importantly her income, provides him with a life he likely could not achieve on his own. He has no demanding career, no pressure from his parents to conform, as he has already shattered their expectations, and a partner who is so grateful to be with him that she is unlikely to make significant demands. He has, in essence, engineered the perfect, low-effort life for himself, funded by another person's life savings and emotional sacrifice. The con is not about a big, one-time score. It's about securing a permanent, comfortable, and responsibility-free existence. He's not playing for a jackpot. He's playing for a lifelong pension. And we, the audience, and the platform of 90 Day Fiancé itself, have played a fascinating role in all of this. For a con artist, public validation is the ultimate tool. By putting their story on international television, TLC has, inadvertently, legitimized it. They have packaged the red flags, the lies, and the betrayals into a romantic narrative. They have edited the footage, added the music, and presented us with a story of star-crossed lovers. This public narrative makes it even harder for Jenny to leave. Leaving isn't just a private heartbreak, it's a public failure, an admission that the TV show love story was a lie. Furthermore, the platform has made Sumit a celebrity of sorts. He is recognized, he is talked about. For a man who may have spent his life feeling like a failure, concocting failed business schemes, this attention is a powerful drug. The show has given him what he always wanted, status and success, without the need for any actual accomplishment. It is the ultimate con. He has not only convinced one woman to dedicate her life to him, he has convinced a television network and millions of viewers to watch and in many cases to root for him. He has monetized his own deception. So let's circle back to the ex-wife. Why speak out now? What is her motivation? Perhaps it is simple revenge, a desire to see the man who humiliated her get his public comeuppance. But perhaps it is something more complex. Maybe for years, she has watched this story play out on social media, seeing Jenny celebrated for her resilience, seeing Sumit portrayed as a reformed man. And maybe she couldn't stand the lie anymore. Maybe she feels a sense of duty, a warning to the world, and especially to Jenny, about the true character of the man she married. Perhaps she sees Jenny not as a rival, but as the next victim in a long line, and this is her attempt to finally break the cycle. She isn't just trying to tear down their relationship, she's trying to sound an alarm, to scream fire in a crowded theater where everyone is calmly watching the flames, convinced it's just part of the show. Her voice, coming from the shadows of the past, is not just an accusation. It's a potential lifeline. It's the one piece of external validation Jenny needs to finally trust her own doubts. Now, we must paint two pictures of Jenny's future. In the first picture, she stays. She dismisses the allegations as the bitter ramblings of a scorned ex-wife. She chooses to believe Sumit. She doubles down. But the seed of doubt has been planted. From this day forward, every time he is sweet to her, a small voice in her head will ask, is this real or is this for the cameras? Is he being kind or is he just managing his assets? Every time they have a financial disagreement, she will wonder if she is seeing the first cracks in the facade, the first sign that the pension is running out. She will live in a state of quiet, gnawing paranoia, forever looking over her shoulder, terrified of the day the mask might finally slip. Her love will be tainted by a permanent, incurable suspicion. She will have her man, but she will have lost her peace of mind, forever. She will have won the battle, but lost the war for her own soul. In the second picture, she leaves. This path is excruciating. It involves a public admission of defeat and humiliation. It means returning to America, her savings depleted, her heart shattered, to face her daughters and say, "You were right." It means spending her final years not in the warm glow of Indian sunsets, but in the harsh light of a painful truth. It would be an act of immense, almost unimaginable bravery. It would be a lonely and devastating process. But at the end of that path, there is a glimmer of something precious. Freedom. The freedom from deception. The freedom from the constant, exhausting work of believing a lie. The freedom to be herself again, not as a character in someone else's story, but as the author of her own. She would be broken, but she would be whole. She would be scared, but she would be free. The entire saga of Sumit and Jenny has been presented as a romance. But these new allegations, this testimony from the ghost of Sumit's past, suggests that we may have been misclassifying the genre all along. This may not be a love story. It might be a true crime documentary, and we are watching the final act, where the key witness finally takes the stand. The evidence is circumstantial but overwhelming. The pattern of behavior is consistent. The psychology is chillingly plausible. The forgotten victim has found her voice, and her testimony has the power to reframe everything we thought we knew. So, the question is not just for Jenny anymore. It's for all of us who have watched the story unfold. Can we, as an audience, continue to see this as a quirky, unconventional love story? Or must we now face the uncomfortable possibility that we have been cheering on a victim and celebrating a predator? This story has now transcended mere reality television drama. It has become a cautionary tale, a stark and brutal reminder that the most dangerous lies are not the ones we are told, but the ones we tell ourselves. It's a lesson in the seductive power of a good story and the devastating cost of believing in a fairy tale when you are living in a horror movie. The ball is in Jenny's court, but the whole world is watching, and for the first time, we are not just watching a TV show. We are watching a woman at a crossroads who must now make a choice that will define not only her future, but the very truth of her past. She has to decide once and for all if she is the hero of a great romance or the final girl in a psychological thriller. And her decision will be the final word in one of the most shocking, complex, and tragic stories 90 Day Fiancé has ever told.